And there we are. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our another week of Live at Five. We're out in the beautiful wintry Colorado. Actually, today it's gorgeous and sunny. I took this picture from at dawn down my block as I was getting up early to go. It was a Sunday morning in the snow, I think it was, or maybe it was. Yeah, it must have been Sunday morning. It was very, very pretty. And there's a certain Colorado weather thing that happens when this like light, a wet spring snow falls, and there's no wind, and it grabs every single branch. That's what this is. Every little detail of branch is like highlighted with this like brown and white. So I wore my brown tree tie, and I'm like hiding. I'm hiding in the picture. You can't really see me, right? I get to hide in there with white shirt and my leaf tie, and you could sort of see it's like a leafy tie. I don't know. Anyway, I hope you had a wonderful Shabbos. We're gonna have a short week because we have Purim coming up this week. Thursday night and Friday are Purim. Very, very, very exciting. It's sometimes called a minor holiday, but in many ways called in our minds a major holiday. We're going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to talk about the Parsha this week. We're going to talk about weekly events. We'll go through another chapter of the Megillah today on the show, and we'll give you some other important things to know about this week Jewishly, big week Jewishly. But before we do all of that fun stuff, I want to just make one or two announcements. I want to share our condolences. I just found out that the grandmother of Darren Fink passed away. We want to wish him and his family condolences. Darren's wife, Jenny, was one of the presenters of this year's Clean Speech Colorado campaign, and she spoke on behalf of Aisha of the Rockies, and it was nice to have her participate, and we're sorry to hear about the loss of Darren's grandmother. May we share in many simchas and many happy occasions. So I want to wish them our condolences. Also, in my announcements, I wanted to likewise announce that although there won't be an opportunity this year for the Purim Puppet Show in person, so that's an unfortunate one. Many years ago, we started doing an annual Purim Puppet Show, and the Purim Puppet Show is a retelling of the story of the Megillah. It takes about 20 minutes. It's done in puppets. That includes funny voices, a fantastic stage, and delightful puppets, including several Mordechais. Not that there was more than one Mordechai, but we got a Mordechai puppet and the Mordechai on the horse puppet. So, we've got the full show for you. And we've done that in person, I think, probably 16 out of the last 17 years for audiences of kids. Really very nice. My wife and I are the puppeteers. We're not trained puppeteers. We don't do any other shows. We just have this one show, but we won't be able to do it in person. So this year the Purim Puppet Show will be happening on the silver screen instead. It is Purim Puppet Show. The movie is coming out this year, and we'll be showing that as soon as it's available. We're in production now, and with my daughter, the film crew. You should have seen our living room. Lights, cameras, tripods, action camera angles, close-ups, faraways, and puppets. It was really it's a lot of fun. Hopefully the show will come out well and we'll be able to share that with you. And so if you have seen it many times and you can't go another Purim without it, we'll have an opportunity. And if you've never seen it, you'll love it, the Purim Puppet Show. That is coming up, but it won't be in person this year. Speaking of in person, there are some in-person opportunities for those who want to make sure to come to hear the Megillah of Esther being read for Purim. The custom on the holiday is the way we fulfill one of the special observances of Purim is to hear the Megillah read twice, both in the evening and the morning, and you need to hear it in person if possible. If you can get to an in-person reading, that's the way to do it. There are some around the city, and there are 2 daytime readings here. If you'd like to come to them, there's one at about 8 a.m., one at 11 a.m. on Friday morning. And if you'd like to attend, let me know. We have seats available. We have limited seats, but we have seats available. Okay, now so we said before that this week is a little bit of a short week, And short for us of Live at 5, because once it comes Thursday at around this time, we're going to be getting very ready for the onset of Purim. It won't be able to be together for Live at 5. The holiday is Thursday night, Friday. Sunset is pretty soon. And the day before the holiday of Purim is what we call Tinus Esther, the fast of Esther. Okay, so we want to kind of get what's going on with the fast of Esther. It's always a fast. Now there is a little bit of misconception about the fast of Esther. Why are we fasting? And that very understandable misconception actually comes from the Megillah itself, chapter 4. This is a little Hebrew 4 over here. And we're going to take a look today at chapter 4, because last week we did chapters 1, 2, and 3. And let's see where the potential misconception comes from and clarify. So what happens in chapter 4 of the Megillah? Well, it's important to know what happened in chapter 3. And chapter 3 is where the wicked decree of Achashverosh and Haman was issued. Haman, as we recall, was personally upset with Mordechai. He felt it beneath his dignity to take on Mordechai as an individual, and he decided the way to get rid of Mordechai is to get rid of his whole people, to get rid of the Jewish people entirely. And he took this idea, this wicked plot, to Achashverosh, and he said, Achashverosh, you got this nation amongst the nations of your empire, and they are different, and we have to get rid of them. And Achashverosh, who our history and tradition is that he was a very easily swayed kind of a person, not a very strong-minded, opinionated leader, but he was easily led. We see throughout the first 3 chapters of the Megillah, anyone who tells Achashverosh, you ought to do this, he says, okay, we'll do this, okay. In fact, I'll give you a preview of the Purim Puppet Show. We made his voice like everything he says is, duh, that sounds okay. Because he's a very, he's not the brightest, he's not the sharpest pencil in the pack, as in crayon in the box, as we say. That's King Achashverosh. So Haman is easily able to lean on the king to issue a decree against the Jewish people. And that happened in chapter 3. Chapter 4 begins as Mordechai, it just hears about this. He sees what's happening, and he sees the existential threat to the Jewish people. That a public decree of total annihilation, man, woman, and child, and all their property be taken, has been issued by the emperor, King Achashverosh. And of course, it's a very sad occurrence. He dons sackcloth, sits on the ground in mourning, as we do on Tisha B'Av. And in fact, this first verse of chapter 4, when the Megillah is read, is chanted in the haunting melody of lamentations of Tisha B'Av. And it sounds a little like this. U'Mordechai yada es kol asher nasa, vayikra Mordechai es bigadav, vayilbash sak va'efer, vayaytze b'sei cha'ir, vayizak zaka gedoylo mara. So I don't know if you can hear the tone of that. It sounds so sad, right? It sounds tragic. The rest of the Megillah is upbeat and happy, but this line, amongst 1 or 2 lines, is a line of real sadness. And it says that Mordechai, he heard what happened. He tore his clothes. He wore sackcloth and ash, and he cried out a great bitter cry as the threat of annihilation against the Jewish people was issued. In this chapter, subsequently, Mordechai jumps into action. And what does he do? He goes to Esther. And as we know from the first couple chapters, Esther has already been made the queen of the entire kingdom. And Mordechai has regular communication with her. There's an intermediary, Hasach, that is a servant of the palace, and he's willing to transfer messages back and forth. And in the chapter, they exchange messages back and forth, Esther and Mordechai. And Mordechai says, Esther, this is it. Go in, speak to the king, and get this decree nullified. Save your people. And Esther says, interestingly, it's this decree isn't against us until Adar. It's like a whole year from now. And we've got plenty of time I'm sure I'm going to be called to speak to him between now and then. If I go in unannounced, I could lose my life. If someone goes in to the king uninvited, off with their heads. So shouldn't I just wait? And I'm sure he's going to call me. He hasn't called me, and recently I'm sure he's about to. When he calls me, I'll do it then. That's Esther's response. But Mordecai says, don't think that you, Esther, could be safe in the palace and the rest of your people will go. This is your opportunity. You're in that position for this reason. Don't fail to step up to the plate. And you need to go in now and do it now. And Mordecai says this amazing thing. He actually says in this chapter, he says, and you know what? If you think that you're going to wait and not step up and risk your life to save the Jewish people's salvation will come from somewhere else. Can you imagine saying that? This is like, you got this. How could Mordecai possibly say that? Everything is like resting on Esther's shoulders. She's the one in the palace. And all she says is, I'll go, but I'll wait. It's more strategic to wait. And Mordecai says, if you don't do it, you and your family will be lost, and the Jewish people's salvation will come from somewhere else. What an unbelievable thing to say. And the sense of that, think of the incredible confidence that Mordecai speaks with. The Jewish people will be saved. If you're not going to be the one to save them, they'll be saved by some other means. But they will be saved. Don't miss your opportunity. It reminds me a little bit of a joke. I don't have a joke exactly, but it's kind of like a joke. And it is Adar after all. The joke goes like this. There was this, it was a lady, elderly lady, she was being wheeled into surgery. And the surgeon, right before the surgery, came over to just check on her one last time. And she says, Doc, I just want you to know that if anything happens, I don't hold you responsible. And the doctor said, I really appreciate you saying that. And then she said, but if it goes right, I don't credit you either. Now, the point was she relies on Hashem, right? She doesn't, I don't recommend that. Don't tell your doctor, don't try to tell your doctor that if it goes right, you don't give him any credit. That's not the way you deal with your doctor. But the mindset of that woman is, I don't fault you because I also don't credit you because I know that God runs the world and you're just the agent. And what's going to happen is going to happen. And you're just the messenger. And Mordecai said to Esther the same thing. The Jewish people will be saved. I know it. I'm confident God is not going to let the Jewish people be annihilated. The Jewish people will be saved. If you're going to rescue them because you put in the position to do so, then you'll be the savior. And if not, they'll be saved by some other means. I know someone else will do it. Unbelievable line, okay? Now, of course, Esther, we know she is the heroine after all. She doesn't fail to take that opportunity. When she hears that she's got to go, Mordecai says, go into the king, even at the risk of her life, and save the Jewish people. She goes. But she says, I have one request first. She says, and this is the conclusion of chapter 4. She says to Mordecai, here's my request before I go in. Gather all of the Jewish people that are in Shushan-Nabir, the capital city, for me, and they should fast, not eat and drink, for 3 days. And with that merit, then I'm going to go in, and if it doesn't work out, and if I go to my death, then I'll go to my death, but I'm going to go, and I'm going to do what I can to save the Jewish people. And that's the end of chapter 4. Now, one might mistakenly think that Tinus Esther, the fast that we do right before Purim, this year will be Thursday day, from sunrise to sundown on Thursday, right before Purim. One might think that Tinus Esther is called the fast of Esther, and you see that Esther declared a fast, that might have been, that's what it is, right? It's the fast. We're fasting like Esther told him to fast. And you know what? You'd be wrong. Because that's actually not what it is. It's a good thought, but it's wrong. The truth is that if we go back to what we said a minute ago, we'll know that it wasn't, the Jewish people weren't fasting now. The fast of Esther. When did the fast of Esther take place? It's an amazing thing because she said, Mordecai, it's a whole year away, Adar. Adar just came and went. It's the month after Adar. It's actually Nisan now. She didn't mention it, but that's what it was. She said it's a whole year away because it was just right after the month of Adar. She said, I've got a whole year to wait. Mordechai said, you can't wait. You have to go in now. She said, okay, fast now. Fast for me for 3 days. You know what those 3 days were? Pesach. And it happens, we have a tradition that year, the Jewish people didn't make Passover Seders because they fasted instead of eating a Passover Seder. Unbelievable. Can you imagine what that kind of an amazing thing that was? They felt, and of course, that their very lives were at stake. And that it called for something that would be so overwhelming, something we would never think to do, to miss the Seder, to fast instead of having a Passover Seder. And they didn't eat Passover Seder that year. They fasted instead because that's when it was. It was a Pesach time, Nisan. It was a month after Purim. It was 11 months till the next Adar. And there is an idea that, we know that as important as the commandments are, that almost all of them are brushed aside in the face of mortal danger, what we call in Hebrew pikuach nefesh. If we have to save a life, we can, generally speaking, we can override, can transgress almost any commandment, even the commandment to eat matzah at the Seder. The threat against all our lives would enable them to miss out on that mitzvah that year. And to some degree, a variation of that will be felt around the world this year. If people are not able to gather together properly to fulfill the mitzvahs of Purim because of the pandemic, because of the potential risk and loss of life, then if we can't do it, we may have to sit it out. Everyone, should think about that and ask, perhaps, we always say, ask your LOA, your LOR. Ask your LOR, your local Orthodox rabbi, if you need guidance on whether or not that's your circumstances. Otherwise, we would hear the Megillah if we can, and if we can't because of potential loss of life and limb. So that would override that, and that year it overrid. Now, so therefore, you should now realize that the fast that we're doing now, the day before Purim, is not the fast that was referred to in chapter 4 of the Megillah that we just read. What is the reason why we fast at Tainus Esther the day before Purim? So it's interesting. There is a very interesting law on the books, a time-honored practice of the Jewish people, that when it would be, if God forbid we were going into war, if there were a battle that needed to be fought, let's say a defensive war, because almost all our wars are almost exclusively defensive. So we go we're in a defensive war situation. So normally you would say that the war is won on the stomach of the army. You got to feed your soldiers, make sure and feed them well. There's an old law of warfare. Don't fight a ground war in Russia in the wintertime because you won't be able to feed the troops. They did a kind of a slash and burn technique. They would just retreat back into Siberia, burn all the crops, and as far as you go, you'll get to a place where you have nothing to eat. And then you're finished. You're toast because you have to feed your soldiers. However, interestingly, the Jewish people has a different practice. The practice of soldiers, of the Jewish people when they go into war is to fast when they go into war. To fast. Can you believe that? It's the exact opposite of what you'd think. We would say give them extra calories. The American, the World War II soldiers, they were giving them cigarettes. Give them whatever they need, make them, feed them and take good care of them and they'll be the best soldiers. But not the Jewish army. The Jewish army, we fast before we go in. Now, what's the logic there? We know that if we're going to be victorious in battle, it's only not because we fought harder or we were more armed or we're smarter, but because God himself is the strength, the might, and the victory. God's going to win for us. If he wants us to win, we're going to win. So what do we need to do? We need to be winning on the spiritual battlefield, earning God's favor, fasting and doing tshuva. We send in not the most not the fastest, strongest, most resilient young men we can find. We send in the most righteous individuals that we can find, because it's the righteous, the spiritual merit of the army that the Jewish people send. That's what we need on the battlefield, and it's God Almighty that will make us successful. And so we fast when we go in. Okay, now that being the case, you'll now understand what's Tinus Esther about. It happens to be that at the end of the Megillah, if we would read all the way to the end, I know I'm ruining the story. Spoiler alert here. I'm gonna tell you what happens, even though we didn't get there yet. But ultimately, the wicked decree of Haman and Achashverosh will be overturned, and instead a new decree will be issued. The Jewish people are not to be slaughtered, but they're to fight back. And they're given the opportunity. We're given the opportunity to defend ourselves. You should know that unlike the miracles of Passover, where Jewish people sat idly by and God, with massive divine miracles, he destroyed our enemies and he saved us. It wasn't that way in Purim. In the Purim story, there were no massive divine miracles. God's hand didn't smite the Persian enemy of the Jewish people. The Jewish people had to pick up their arms and fight to defend themselves. But the miracle was that the decree wasn't that 127 other nations were going to declare it, and National Destroy the Jews Day. And most of those people sat it out. And those people who were willing to pick up arms against us, the true enemies of the Jewish people fought against and won and were victorious. Now, so that means that the Purim story actually ends in a physical military battle. It took place. And what do Jews do when we go to war? Exactly. So they were fasting. Therefore, the fast right before Purim, which we call Tinus Esther, has nothing to do with the 3 days of fasting that are mentioned in chapter 4. That happened in Nisan a year ago, as it were. The fasting that we do was to commemorate the fast that the Jewish army would have been fasting when they went to battle, which took place right now on the 14th of Nisan. They would fast and go into war, and they were victorious. And so that's the fast of Esther, and it's a short one in a sense that it's just sun up to sundown, but that's how we observe this customary fast. However, the practice is that we don't break the fast, generally speaking, until we hear the Megillah read. So that means that as soon as we can possibly hear the Megillah read on Thursday after sundown, we're going to read the Megillah. And then we're gonna break our fast with a meal and with merrymaking, etc. But usually we're fasting all the way through the Megillah, and then we eat. Now, if you don't have the opportunity to hear the Megillah in person promptly, you can break your fast. I think the fast ends at about 6:30 Thursday evening. If you're fasting Thursday day and you're not hearing the Megillah, then you'll fast through till about 6:30, and then the fast is over. You can eat and drink at that point. You don't need to make Havdalah. Okay, you don't need to make Havdalah. Sometimes after, when you're first eating, like after Yom Kippur, and we're fasting all day, Yom Kippur is a Yom Tiv. And so you can't eat after that until you make a Havdalah, which is the special ceremony with prayers and a candle and spices. And that concludes your holiday, and then you can go on and eat and do next. This does not require that. The other fast days don't require that. And as soon as it comes to that time, you can just go ahead and break fast and eat. Now, the other thing to mention along those lines then is that not only does it not need Havdalah, but let me point out this. The next day, Thursday night and Friday day, which is Purim itself, the way we celebrate in here, it is Purim. That's the holiday day. Okay, the fast is Thursday daytime. The holiday is Thursday night, Friday. That is the holiday of Purim, but Purim is not a Yom Tiv. Now, what does that mean? It's not a Yom Tiv. Yom Tiv is the way that we describe our highest level of holidays. So we said before at the beginning of the show, we're going to talk about what it means that in fact Purim could be called a minor holiday. Because if we were distinguishing between major and minor holidays, one could distinguish between the holidays that are assigned to us in the Torah and other holidays that are not mentioned in the Torah. So the ones that are mentioned in the Torah, these are divinely commanded days of rest. God says, rest and celebrate, right? It's very clear. Like Shabbos is a day of rest, a holiday is a day of rest as well. There are some differences, and there are some things which we can do on a holiday which we can't do on Shabbos, where it's a little less resting, if you will. But it's a day of rest, and many and most things that we know that we rest from doing on Shabbos, we rest from doing on the Yom Tovs, and that would be Passover, the first and the last part of it, Shavuos, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and Shmini Atzeres. That is the entire list of the divinely commanded Yom Tovs. And on those days, we don't light fires and we don't ride in cars and all those kinds of things. We know there's a very, very, very great degree of sanctity, which is conferred on the day by the resting. On the other hand, there are holidays which we celebrate, which are the other type, the minor type. They're not mentioned in the Torah anywhere. Why not? Because they commemorate events in Jewish history that took place after the Torah was already written, sealed, and given to the Jewish people. So they can't really be mentioned there. They're commemorating events of later. And since they're not divinely commanded in the Torah, then they're just established by rabbinic leadership as our holidays, the holidays of the Jewish people. But the authority of the rabbis, as great as it is not quite as great as Hashem's. There's like a little gap there, just a little gap there, like this. So those holidays are established by this slightly lesser authority. And then they're not Yom Tovs. They're not as holy because we don't rest as much. And therefore on Purim, we can light a fire. And on Purim, we can drive in the car. In fact, there's nothing better than getting in the car and going around on Purim and giving out Mishloach Manas. You could blast the Purim tunes on the radio. And when our kids were young, we had a minivan and we used to it was very, very, very fun to drive around with the door open, the minivan door open. We would go very slowly and everybody was buckled in and all the children survived. I don't want you to worry. But we would drive around the neighborhood with the minivan door open and we would pull up in front of our friends' houses and the kids would leap out, unbuckle, leap out of the minivan with their costumes, with their mishloach manas, and go up to the door to give out their gifts of food. It was really so fun. And that's because the reason we can do that, we can't do that on a Yom Tov. We couldn't be in the car, but on these minor non-divinely commanded holidays like Purim, like Hanukkah, like other things. Those are the biggies, really, Purim and Hanukkah. There's even minor, lesser ones like maybe Lag BaOmer, just as another example. They're little things. There are minor holidays, but of course they're not accompanied by that degree of obligation to rest, and unfortunately, therefore, they don't have that same sanctity. But let me just to conclude, let me point out the opposite. Because, of course, Purim is a holiday of opposites. So the opposite point is, even though we may therefore think of it as a minor holiday, it really is a major holiday. It's major in the sense that the Jewish people have a tradition, have a prophecy from our very earliest days that we're going to go in our history. We're going to go through 4 periods of exile. The temple will be destroyed. The Jewish people will be kicked out of our land. We'll be exiled and subjugated to the rule of 4 different kingdoms. And when those exiles are over and the Jewish people are rescued from an exile, allowed to go back to the land of Israel, as it were, rebuild the temple, it's hard to imagine a greater reason to celebrate and a greater moment in Jewish history. And so Purim and Hanukkah, both of which are holidays celebrating the end of some of those exiles, they are very, very significant moments in the Jewish calendar, in Jewish history, and therefore, of course, we don't take them lightly at all. Take off work and we crank up and we dial up the costumes and we get ready for excitement, folks. That's been our show for today. We're looking forward to a couple more days together this week. We'll be together tomorrow and Wednesday at Live at 5, and then we'll wish you a happy Purim for the last time before Purim. So have a healthy day and a holy day, and we'll see you tomorrow, God willing, on Live at 5.